Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another DC Multiverse McFarlane Toys figure unboxing and review video. Now today we will be taking a look at the entire wave of figures based off Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. Now I personally am a massive Dark Knight Returns fan, so you bet I'm super excited to get them out here. Now I got mine from toyswonderland.com. Link for that is of course in the description below. They have 12-month installment plans and a points-based reward system. What we are going to do now though is get the box for Batman laying flat in the light box and start the unboxings. Here of course we have the box art, and it's done in the usual DC Multiverse style. Don't worry, we won't spend a ton of time on the box itself after we've taken this guy out of it. Now you can see a massive open window showcasing Batman himself, DC Multiverse down below. On the back we do have an image of Batman riding the horse, and it does let you know which parts he comes with. But we're not really here to dissect the box, we're more here to check out Batman himself. Funnily enough, they've actually taped both legs for the horse together one on top of the other, even though there very clearly is a spot for the second leg. I don't know if that's just some weird packaging mishap on mine, but it's just something I found rather funny. Now, these Batman figures are always a little bit challenging to get out of the box because their cape is wedged through the back of the clamshell, and the capes do often tend to flare out towards the bottom. As for Batman himself, so far I'm pretty impressed, but we do still have 3 more figures to unbox. Moving on to the Joker. The packaging is exactly the same as Batman, big open window, collector build and horse, and then an image, in fact, the same image that was on the back of Batman's box. Now, initially I thought there was a mistake and this was supposed to be an image of Joker, this image right down here, just blown up. But no, this very same picture is on the back of all 4 boxes. Now you can see the Joker does come with the head and the saddle for the collector build horse. Now I totally understand if this look for the Clown Prince of Crime isn't for you. It's not necessarily the most iconic Joker design, but it is specific to the Dark Knight Returns. I will let you know how I feel about it as we work our way through the rest of the video. But we do still have 2 more to unbox. The box art for Robin once again is exactly the same as the other 2, except this time the body of the horse actually takes up the majority of the packaging, with Robin being one of the smallest things in this box. Now on the back, as I said just a second ago, we have the exact same image as Batman and the Joker, plus it lets you know we are getting the body of the horse if it wasn't already apparent. Now I do have the Mafex version of Carrie Kelly on the way. She of course comes in a 2-pack with Batman, so definitely stay tuned to the channel because we will be doing comparisons back to the Mafex one when it eventually arrives. First in-hand impressions though are that this is a very brightly coloured figure. It's absolutely going to stand out on the shelf. However, we will be discussing that more in just a second. We have one final figure to unbox, and that's none other than Superman himself. Now once again we do have a big wide open window on the front of the box, on the back that same exact image, and it lets us know we are getting the hind legs for our collector build horse. I was actually considering doing snap transitions for getting these guys and gals out of the clam tray, but I did want to show you that sometimes when it comes to unboxing figures, the struggle is very real. I don't know why they always insist on threading these capes through the back of the clamshell itself, but it always makes for a very challenging and sometimes frustrating unboxing experience. What we are going to do now though is get all of the accessories that come with Batman, Superman, the Joker and Robin laid out in the light box and take a closer look at everything they come with. Here we have all the parts and pieces. Now starting off with Batman first, he only comes with one real accessory, and that's his grappling rope. Usually we're used to seeing a grappling gun, but this is a much older, grizzled version of Batman, so he's decided to just use a rope. It's spooled up on one end and it droops down on the other, plus you have the hook section pre-sculpted. There isn't any paint on it, but I'm perfectly fine with that. You do also get an image of him actually holding it, if you weren't sure how to do that, on the front of the trading card. You also get a read-up printed on the back. And finally, Todd has given us two closed fists for both Batman and Superman. We have been asking for this for the longest time, and thank goodness McFarlane has finally listened. You also get a DC Multiverse circular display base with a peg on one side. As for Robin, she also comes with a trading card, a really nice image of the figure on the front, and a read-up printed on the back. Now, she also only comes with one accessory, and that's her slingshot. It's pre-sculpted off to one side, it's done in a nice metallic silver with some brown for the string section, and of course she comes with the exact same display base. As for Joker, you have a really nice image of the Clown Prince of Crime plus Batman off to one side. I also like the crazy ha 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 in the background, it's a very nice image. You also have a read-up printed on the back, as you would expect. Now, Joker does come with his knife, but not a gun. For some reason, Warner Brothers are fine with people being stabbed, I guess, but guns are out of the question. Now, this is the gun that came with the Mattel version. It's very stylized and comic book-esque. I will be using this with my Multiverse figure. This knife is obviously seen in the comic, where he stabs Batman a bunch of times, but the gun would have been a nice inclusion as well. He also comes with a gripping hand that's been painted in this off-white matte colour. Now, he also, of course, comes with his display base. Lastly, for Superman, a trading card, and flipping around on the back, a read-up, as you would expect. He doesn't come with anything except for an open-palmed pair of gripping hands. They are both cast in skin color with no paint to speak of. The other hands he comes with are two closed fists, which you bet I'm very happy about. What we are going to do now, though, is get the figures themselves out here and take a closer look. One of the incentives to pick up the entire wave is the collect-to-build horse. Now, the cool thing about this is you can technically use this horse with your Mafex Batman as well, and I fully intend to do that. Now, to save trying to wrangle this and assemble it on camera, I have a much easier way. I am pleasantly surprised by this horse. Initially, I thought this thing was going to feel cheap, flimsy, and very hollow. While it is hollow in the body section, it also feels very sturdy and quite hefty. A lot of plastic has gone into this horse. Now, I think it's mostly an illusion due to how hefty the tail is. This is one solid hunk of plastic, and how the limbs have been constructed. Now, the head sculpt for the horse looks like a horse. It's also quite nicely painted. The buckle sections are a little bit messy, but I can forgive that because of how big the horse is and how small those buckles are. Now, you do have the reins that are connected up the front here, and they are on swivels, so you can move them around. There are also some washers down in the crevices for the straps, and I love the fact that you have a Batman logo on the saddle. Although for some reason, that looks a lot like the Nolan Trilogy bat symbol. I don't know why they couldn't have gone with the Dark Knight Returns symbol, but still, it's a bat symbol on a saddle. It looks awesome. There are washers in the crevices of the saddle, the silver has been painted nicely, and you do have the sections for his feet to slot into. Now, when assembling the horse, I would advise sliding this on first, then the head, then the legs, and lastly peg in the tail. Now, as for articulation on the horse, the neck can hinge up and down on a ratchet joint, and you do have a ball joint at the head itself. It does hinge forward and back, swivel, and pivot side to side. The legs are rather stiff, but they will also go forward and back. They can bend on the midsection, and you do have a hinge and swivel down here for the ankle. At the back, they also hinge forward forward and back, bend at, I guess, what would be considered a knee, hinge and swivel for the ankle, plus the tail also has a hinge and swivel joint, so you can turn it side to side and move it up and down. As I promised though, you will be seeing Batman on the horse a little bit later in the video. Here we have Batman standing straight up and down in the light box, no crazy poses or accessories or anything like that. And this is exactly what I was hoping for when it was announced that McFarlane Toys were going to take over from Mattel for DC Multiverse. I was sitting there thinking, oh, okay, this is interesting. Now we're going to have Todd McFarlane potentially do a few waves of classic comic book stories. I was hoping for Hush, Long Halloween, maybe the Three Jokers, which they turned out to, go ahead and do. Plus, of course, my all-time favourite, The Dark Knight Returns. When they announced this wave, I was over the moon. Now that I have the Batman in hand, can I say that he was worth the wait? For the most part, yes. He is a big, chunky, beefy Batman, and that's probably not the last time you're going to hear me using those words throughout the course of the video. If y'all don't like it, I apologize, but it's literally the best way I can describe him. He is massive. Now, there are a couple of interesting choices which hold this guy back from being perfect, but that doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, this is still a darn good version of Dark Knight Returns Batman. Next up, we have Carrie Kelly as Robin. Now, when I was first introduced to The Dark Knight Returns, I watched the animated films and I read the book. Carrie Kelly didn't really resonate with me. I never thought this was a convincing take on Robin. Now, however, that I've watched it a bunch more times and I've started to appreciate it more and more, Carrie Kelly has definitely grown on me. She now is actually one of my favourite incarnations of Robin. It's crazy how our minds can change after we experience more of something. But nevertheless, in figure format, she looks really good. This might be my favourite smaller scale Carrie Kelly. Now, I haven't reviewed the Mafex one yet, but I definitely will be, and we'll see if this figure poses stiff competition or not. Now, the colours here are very vibrant. She kind of looks like a super classic version of Robin. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if someone actually goes ahead and sculpts a Dick Grayson head sculpt to make a very retro-looking version of Robin, because this body could totally work for that. But as Carrie Kelly, I'm pretty happy. Next up, we have the Joker. Now, even though I've discussed earlier how this isn't the most iconic look for him, it still is a very interesting one. Having a very stark white suit with a ton of detail on the surface, and having it cut this very interesting angular silhouette is absolutely going to help him stand out in the display. Now, he might not be everyone's favourite Joker, but he definitely is one that your eye is going to be drawn to. And at the end of the day, that's pretty much why we put together displays, to catch the eye. Now, would I have liked to have seen a couple of different head sculpts here, the gun, etc.? Yes, absolutely. Especially the head sculpt with the Batarang in the eye. Talk about iconic. But, just like Batman, I'm really happy that Todd decided to do this guy. Now, could he have done Mutant Leader? Yes, absolutely. But the Joker is still a very important part of the story. Next up, we have the Man of Steel. Now, this one I was really excited for, just like Batman. I wanted to have the two figures squaring off in the display, and I'm pretty sure that's exactly what I'm going to do. Although I might just be going with the Mafex Batman. We'll have to wait and see. Superman, though, is just like Batman. Big, beefy, and chunky, which is exactly what I was expecting. There is a ton of plastic here. But just like Batman, they have made some very interesting choices. One choice in particular that is really throwing off the entire look of the figure. If you think you know what it is, head down to the comments section and let me know before we get into the close-ups. But at the end of the day, I'm still really happy to have this guy in this wave. What we are going to do now though is get Batman himself back out here, punch in, and take a closer look at the details. Here we have him up close and personal. Now, for the most part, I am very happy with how this guy turned out. Is he perfect? No. Is the Mafex version superior? Yes, it definitely is, but it comes in at a much higher price point. So we do have to bear that in mind when looking at this guy. Now, starting off with his head sculpt, I really like it. The paint applications for the mouth area are crisp and clean, and there are multiple layers of paint. It's not just one flat skin tone, there is some wash in the crevices, plus his teeth are all fully painted. Now, the only complaint I have is the size of the sculpt itself. McFarlane have used an old toy maker's trick of shrinking the head sculpt down to make the body look even bigger, and for the most part it has worked. But I think they've scaled it down just a touch too much. Do let me know what you think of this head sculpt and how it fits in proportion to the rest of the body down in the comments below. Now, the cape is fully sculpted and it kind of goes over the top of his shoulders. It is this one flat, solid hunk of plastic. From the front, it looks perfectly fine, but from the back, it looks all kinds of weird. It's as though they've intended this to be multiple layers of cape that's been sort of folded over itself. But at the same time, it's paper thin. I'm hoping that going forward they don't use this as their template for Batman capes, because it's a real head scratcher. I don't love the way that looks. What I do love here though is the suit, or I should say the body, because it's all fully sculpted. You do have a ton of wrinkles and creases on the surface, so it actually looks like a fabric suit. They've also done that on the trunks and the belt. You don't just have these rectangular solid hunks of plastic, there is actually some variation to how they've been sculpted. Now, this figure I think could do with a wash over the grey suit. It would really bring out all of that sculpted in detail. But for the most part, the base sculpt is very good. He also has that massive oversized bat symbol on his chest, very Dark Knight Returns. I also wouldn't be surprised if they have an alternate version in the works with the blue cowl, blue cape, and the oval style bat symbol. I definitely will be picking up that version if they decide to do it. The gloves do have the spikes on the back as you would expect, plus some leather texture sculpted into the surface. The same thing can be said for the boots down below. They come up to a point, and they too have a ton of leather texture sculpted onto the front. So far, with this being the first figure I've opened up in the wave, yeah, I'm pretty happy. Moving on to the Clown Prince of Crime. Now, his outfit is relatively straightforward in The Dark Knight Returns, but there are a lot of very distinct shapes that they had to nail. The suit does get pinched in at the waist, these very broad shoulders, and everything is kind of really blocky. For the most part, they have nailed it. Now, starting off with the head sculpt, I really like it. Is it perfect? Just like Batman? No, unfortunately it isn't. I'm pretty sure the expression they were going for was this one, the same one that Mattel gave us on their version of Joker. Now, for me, I think Mattel did it slightly better. I love the Batarang wedged in his eye, and we will be trying this head sculpt out on the McFarlane body a little bit later on. Overall though, this is painted far nicer than the Mattel one ever was. The paint applications for the white are crisp and clean. I like the way the teeth are done, there's shading around his eyes, and you do have some dry brushing on his hair. So for the most part, even though I like the execution of this one more, on paper, this is the better sculpt. Now, the body is drastically different from the Mattel figure. The Mattel one is a lot more comic accurate, where this one takes more liberties. I'm perfectly fine with that, because I think it's worked out really well. He still has the accurate silhouette, but now there is a ton of texture on the surface, whereas the Mattel version is just very flat and smooth. You can also see some purple poking out for his cuffs of the shirt, and you do have a separate tie. Now you can tuck this in under his suit jacket if you want, but I kind of like it flying around outside the suit jacket. It shows you how crazy this Joker can be. He doesn't even care enough to tuck his tie in underneath his jacket. Now, coming down to the pants, they're a much more off-white cream color as compared to his jacket. Now, I would have been perfectly fine if these two were matching, but having a two-tone finish is also something that's going to help this guy stand out in the display. You do have a faux crease that's been sculpted into the front of the pants, and they're a little bit wrinkled over the top of his very stylish purple high-heeled boots. Now, these are pretty basic in the way they're done, and I wouldn't have minded if they'd used a different color for this ankle joint. Having it the same color as the pants, but having the pants end very clearly above it is a weird choice. I think some black to kind of mimic socks or any other color would have worked equally as well. But for the most part, yeah, I'm pretty happy with Joker. Moving on to Carrie Kelly as Robin. Now, going into this, I thought she was going to be my least favorite figure in the wave just because of how small she is. But now that we're partway through the video, I can honestly say that she might actually be my favorite, much to my surprise. Now, starting off with the head sculpt, it's very close to being perfect. The hairpiece is large and oversized and swoops around the front. The glasses are translucent green plastic, and yes, she actually has painted eyes behind them. Now, the only thing that could make this just a little bit better in my mind would be some dry brushing on the hair. But other than that, this head sculpt is awesome. Now, the body is very small, as you would expect. We will see what that means for articulation a little bit later on in the video. I am pleased to report that the cape is nothing like Batman's. It actually has some depth to it. There are creases sculpted in, and it does swoosh off to one side. But I'm not mad at that. It's slightly more dynamic, and at the very least, it's not flat like a pancake. I would have loved to have seen some washes down in the crevices, but that's something I can do myself. The rest of her outfit is very classic Robin. A big honkin' R on the front there, all of the yellow sections are crisp and clean, plus her belt is fully painted. The green sections are very vibrant. In fact, this entire figure is super vibrant. So if you're looking for a Batman plus a Robin that will stand out on your shelf, I reckon these Dark Knight Returns figures could be very strong contenders. Now, the skin sections for the elbows, or I should say the arms and her legs, are literally just cast in skin-colored plastic. I'm perfectly happy with how they've done that, but there isn't really any definition there. Also, I've never complained about the McFarlane style ball hinges to date, but I am going to do that here, because for the ankles they're just far too large. McFarlane, you can still use these joints, that's totally fine, but just shrink them down a little bit smaller for characters that could do with smaller joints. I mean, they definitely do stand out at the ankles, a little bit less so at the wrists. Lastly, we have the Man of Steel. Now, this one I was really excited for, but I can't help but feel a little bit let down by him. He isn't perfect. In fact, I think he's far from it. They've made some very interesting choices, starting off with the head sculpt. It's really ugly. Now, yes, I'll be the first to admit that Frank Miller's artwork didn't really depict Batman and Superman in their most beautiful format. But still, he looked a darn sight better than this in most panels. Now, yes, I'm sure you could find a panel that matches this head sculpt almost exactly, but it's just a very weird choice. The expression, the eyes off to one side, and the way they've sculpted the hair, I don't actually think the hair is even big enough to be the Dark Knight Returns version of Superman. Also, they have fully painted the flesh tone on the head sculpt, but not the neck, so now there's a bit of a disparity between the skin tone up here and down here. I don't know, once again, why they've made that choice. Now, the cape doesn't actually have the S symbol on the back, and that's because of the crazy sculpting. It is a little bit flatter than Robin's, but it's nowhere near as flat as Batman's. There's actually this flap that comes over the top and it swooshes off to one side. The cape I'm perfectly fine with, except for that missing S-shield. One thing that I really don't like though is that they painted over the belt loops. I followed the tutorial in Brad the DC Universe Geek's video and I removed the paint on my second copy of Superman. I used some acetone and yes, it came right off, and now he looks way better. But this isn't something we should have to do ourselves. We're not asking for more paint, Todd, we're actually asking for less paint. Simply don't paint the belt loops and now he looks a darn sight better. The body though I really like. It's big, it's beefy, and just like Batman, there are a ton of wrinkles sculpted into the surface. You also have a ton of musculature. As you would expect, this is Superman. And then coming down to his boots, a little bit of texture on the surface, plus a ton more wrinkles. They've also done the thing that I was praising Mafex for by sculpting it down over one side to make for a more seamless look. This is definitely something I hope to see going forward. I also hope to see a replacement head sculpt, because as it stands, this head sculpt just doesn't cut it. Just before we move on, I wanted to try the Mattel head sculpt on the McFarlane body, and for the most part, this looks really good. I do prefer the head sculpt from the Mattel figure. I think it just looks more accurate to the source material. There are two issues though. The skin tone is much lighter and it's a lot more splotchy. Now I could always repaint the neck on the McFarlane figure. That would definitely be easier than repainting this head sculpt, but I'm not sure if that's something I want to try. Also, the neck peg isn't really compatible with these head sculpts. They end up sitting a little bit too high. Now, yes, you could always 3D print one and make it look the way you want it to by sizing it up or down, but I'm comfortable with just literally frictioning it in place. It sits there and it's definitely not going to fall off. This is absolutely my favorite of the two head sculpts with the Batarang in his eye, so in my display I'm pretty sure that's the one I'm going to go with. Also, if you happen to have the Mattel figure and you want to use his gun here, the DC Multiverse McFarlane one does come with a trigger finger hand, so yes, it is fully compatible. As promised, here we have Batman on his trusty steed, and as you can see, they actually look really good posed up together. Now, of course, the horse is more versatile than just being able to stand there, but it also will take up a significant amount of room in your collection. So it is going to be a tough decision to decide whether or not you are going to actually have Batman on the horse or posed up alongside Robin, Superman, and Joker. This is a really cool display option. It's something super different and super unique. I don't think we've ever received a standalone Build-A-Figure horse before that we can actually use with our Dark Knight Returns figures. And the best part is, if you have other 7-inch scale figures that require a horse, you now have the ability to get one and also build yourself a kick-ass Dark Knight Returns wave. But as promised, I do also want to show you what the Mafex figure looks like on this horse. Now, the only unfortunate thing about pairing up this horse with Mafex Batman is that the Batman figure himself is slightly smaller in scale. He has all of the right joints to be able to ride the horse properly, but because he is a little bit smaller, his legs, or I should say his feet, struggle to reach the stirrups. Everything else, though, works really nicely. In the right pose, in the right lighting, in the right diorama display, this is going to look incredible. But for me, if I was going to use the horse, I probably would stick with the DC Multiverse one. Now for a quick side-by-side comparison, I thought we'd start off with Black Suit Batman first, because he's the only one I have the Mafex counterpart for now. As you can see, the Multiverse figure is significantly taller, as to be expected. expected. It's a much larger scale line. It's supposed to be around the 7-inch mark. Now, for me, that doesn't really bother me. I'm still perfectly happy with the Mafex figure being a little bit shorter than Superman and Robin if I was to mix and match within this line. Now, I totally understand if that isn't for you. They're not really meant to work together anyway, but as you can see, they do look drastically different. I give the win immediately to Mafex. I think it looks exactly like Frank Miller's artwork. The Multiverse one is no slouch though, I still really like the way it looks. But it just goes to show that for that higher price point, you're definitely getting a little bit more accuracy. Next up, here we have the entire wave standing together, and I have them organized from smallest all the way to tallest. Superman is very clearly the biggest of the bunch, both in bulk and in height, and I'm perfectly fine with that. It's Superman. He's supposed to be this big beefy guy, especially in The Dark Knight Returns. Now, I really like the way they all look standing together. Now, I do have complaints about them individually and stuff that I would have liked to have seen done slightly differently, but at the end of the day, this looks, to me at least, like a darn good lineup. The only figure that I would have liked to have seen in this wave that they didn't make would have been Mutant Leader. I'm hoping going forward we get a second wave and we do get a blue version of Batman, a different version of Clark, maybe an alternate look for Joker, who knows, we'll have to wait and see, only time will tell. But for now, so far, I'm really happy with this wave. Just going over articulation. Now, bear in mind, these are my personal copies of the figures, so I'm going to be a little bit more careful. I'm sure when you get yours in hand, you can push the joints slightly further than I am willing to go. Now, starting off with the head sculpt, it is on a double ball peg, looking forward and back, swivel and pivot side to side. The arms will go up to there on soft ratchets, they will go forward and back, butterfly joint at the shoulder that also hinges up and down. A single bend at the elbow that gets you to 90, and you do have an incorporated swivel, plus the regular old McFarlane style wrist pegs. They are just hinge and swivel joints. You do have a ball joint at the midsection and another at the waist. Combined, you don't get a ton of range forward. He does go slightly further back, swivel and pivot side to side. The legs will go forward to there comfortably, they will go out to there. You do have two different types of swivel, one up here at the hips and another that's incorporated into his thigh. We don't see that very often. You do have a double bend at the knee that does get you past 90, a hinge and swivel for the ankle, plus toe articulation. Next up for the Joker, he's going to be a little bit more restricted. Starting off with the head sculpt, it is on a double ball peg, looking forward and back, swivel and pivot side to side. The arms will go up to there on soft ratchets, forward and back, a teeny amount of butterfly up there at the shoulder. You do have a double bend at the elbow that is on ratchets, but unfortunately there is no swivel to be found on his arms, just due to the nature of the sculpt work. He does have a hinge and swivel for his wrist peg. The torso is also relatively restricted due to the rubbery jacket. He does crunch forward and back just a little, swivel and pivot side to side. The legs will go forward to there, they will go out to there, but unfortunately you don't get a ton of swivel up here at the hips. The knees are super tight, you do have a single bend that is on ratchets and it does get you to 90, plus it incorporates a swivel. Down here at the ankle, a hinge and swivel joint, plus toe articulation. Next up we have Robin. This is definitely the smallest DC Multiverse figure that I've ever seen. I'm curious to see how the joints work. The head sculpt is on a double ball peg. She actually does get a ton of range forward and back, swivel and then pivot side to side. The arms will go out to there, they will of course go forward and back, and you do get a little bit of butterfly range as well. Swivel up at the top part of her green shirt, a double bend at the elbow that goes the full way, plus a hinge and swivel for the wrist peg. The torso is covered in this rubbery overlay, so you don't get a ton of crunch, swivel or pivot side to side. The legs will go forward to there, they will go out to there. You do get a teeny amount of swivel. A double bend at the knee, that's number 1 on ratchets, and number 2 gets you past 90, hinge and swivel down here for the ankle. And even though her shoes are as tiny as they are, you still have toe articulation. And then lastly, for the Man of Steel, he's going to work in a very similar fashion, I would imagine, to Batman. The head sculpt is on a double ball peg, swivel and pivot side to side. Arms will go up to there, they will go forward and back. You don't get as much range out of the butterfly though. It does hinge up and down just a little. A single bend at the elbow that does get you to 90 and a swivel incorporated as well. Plus that hinge and swivel joint for the wrist peg. The torso does crunch forward and back, surprisingly a lot more than Batman, swivel and pivot side to side. The legs will go forward to there. They will go out to there. They also incorporate a swivel underneath his red diaper section, a double bend at the knee that does go past 90, hinge and swivel for the ankle, plus toe articulation. Just wrapping up on the DC Multiverse Dark Knight Returns wave. Now, going into this, I was extremely excited. I mean, Dark Knight Returns is my favorite comic book storyline for Batman, and I love the DC Multiverse figures, especially the larger scale. Now, at the end of the video, can I say that this was indeed a match made in heaven? In some regards, yes, but in others, no. Now, let's talk about Batman and Robin first. They are my favourites of the wave. I'm almost tempted to say Robin is my favourite over and above everyone else, which really surprised me. I love the sculpt work, it's crisp and clean, the paint applications are on point, and she actually has a decent level of articulation for a much smaller in scale figure. They've also done the glasses extremely well, way better than Mattel did in my opinion, and the slingshot is kind of a necessity for this version of Robin. As for Batman, I love the closed fists. Todd, please keep doing that going forward. His accessory being the spooled up rope I'm totally fine with. It seems as though McFarlane took inspiration from the Prime 1 statue because he also was holding a spooled up rope. Would I have loved to have seen something else, maybe the sniper rifle? Yeah, absolutely, but this works as well. I also really like the body. He's big, he's beefy, this is Frank Miller's version of Batman. The only complaints I have are, number 1, the cape, which is really weird, and the head sculpt. The sculpt itself and the expression are both fine, it's just the size of it that upsets me a little. It's slightly too small. Other than that though, these two are fantastic offerings. If you are tempted to pick up just these two, I reckon you're going to be pretty darn happy. As for Joker, as we discussed earlier, this is not the iconic look, but it still works out very nicely. I love the angular look to the body, the added in sculpted detail on the jacket, the tie that can be sort of moved around or tucked in, plus the vibrant purple for his shirt and his boots. All of the colours and the shapes work together marvellously. Now, the head sculpt isn't perfect. It's not really bang on to the artwork, at least in my opinion. I think the Mattel ones got just that little bit closer, but I'm still really happy with how he turned out. The fact that he doesn't come with the gun though is a little bit frustrating. Please, Warner Brothers, work it out. Figure out that including weapons that are actually pictured in the comic book storylines that these figures are based off isn't necessarily a bad thing. Now, at the end of the day, would I have preferred Mutant Leader instead of Joker? Yeah, absolutely. I think for this particular storyline for Batman, Mutant Leader was more important. The Joker's appearance was rather harrowing, but it was fleeting. Now, the figure selection aside, yes, Joker is important to Batman as a whole, but do let me know, would you have preferred Joker or Mutant Leader? And then of course we have Superman. I was really excited to be receiving a new version of Clark, and for the most part he delivers. He isn't perfect, just like the other figures in the wave, but I think his crimes are far less egregious. The head sculpt is ugly, but it is at the very least the right scale for the body. It's not shrunk down like Batman's, so everything looks properly in proportion. Plus, I'm pretty sure if you look at certain panels from The Dark Knight Returns, this head sculpt will match up quite well. It's just not the look I personally would have gone with. The body is great, no complaints whatsoever. It's big, it's muscly, and it's well detailed with wrinkles and details on the surface of the suit itself. Now, the one complaint with the suit would be the belt loops. Todd, we're actually asking for less paint in this instance, not more. You literally just have to mask the belt loops before painting the yellow on top. Now, yes, you can remove it and it looks a darn sight better, but I would have rather not have to do that. The accessories are few and far between here. He only comes with some open palm hands. I would have loved to have seen a heat vision head sculpt, the Green Arrow kryptonite arrow that he could have held in his hand, but at the end of the day, it's a bare bones version of Superman, and the figure himself is actually pretty decent. That's kind of my sentiment for the entire wave. The horse isn't really a huge incentive for me. It's cool, but it's not something that I absolutely had to have in the display. The figures themselves, though, definitely are. And at the end of the video, I can say that, yeah, I think they are worth picking up. But just know that there are a couple of things that make these figures a little bit less than perfect. They're still great, and they still represent the artwork very nicely, but there are a couple of things that hold them back. Now, I got mine from toyswonderland.com. Link for that is in the description below. They have 12-month installment plans and a points-based reward system. While you're down there, why not check out the link to 6 Scale Network, the Facebook group. Come along, chat figures, share photos of your collection, and of course, see what's coming up next on the channel. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.